Emma Caldwell stood barefoot on the auction block, her parents' blood still crusted on her skin, as drunken miners shouted bids for her body. When the Apache chief silenced the room with his offer, she couldn't tell if he represented salvation or a different kind of doom. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Montana Territory, 1876. The sound of splintering wood jolted Emma Caldwell from sleep, her body tensing beneath the patchwork quilt her mother had finished just last spring. For one disoriented moment, she thought it might be her father returning late from town, until the screams pierced the night. "Pa," she whispered, reaching for the woolen shawl draped across her bedpost. The flickering orange glow seeping through her window told her what her mind refused to accept: fire. Emma's bare feet hit the rough wooden floor as more crashes and shouts erupted from the main room of their homestead. Her fingers trembled as she fumbled with the latch on her bedroom door. Through the crack, she glimpsed her father's body sprawled unnaturally across the threshold, a dark pool spreading beneath him. "Ma," she screamed, but her voice was drowned by raucous laughter and the thundering of boots. Three men, filthy, bearded, with eyes gleaming like hungry wolves, stood over her mother's crumpled form. "Well, look what we found," the tallest one drawled, turning toward Emma's partially open door. Miller was right. Caldwell did have a daughter. Emma slammed the door shut, her heart hammering against her ribs. There was no time for grief, no time for fear. She lunged for the window, prying at the frame her father had sealed against the winter chill. Behind her, boots stomped toward her door, followed by the splintering of wood as someone drove a shoulder against it. The window gave way just as rough hands seized her nightdress, yanking her backward. Emma fought like a wildcat, clawing, kicking, tasting blood when her elbow connected with someone's nose. A curse, then blinding pain as something hard struck her temple. The world faded to darkness. When consciousness returned, Emma found herself slung across a horse, her hands bound with rough rope that bit into her wrists. The rhythmic thud of hoofbeats matched the pounding in her skull. Dawn was breaking, painting the Montana sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed to mock the horror of the night. "She's awake," a voice called. The horses slowed, and someone yanked her upright. Emma blinked against the morning light, taking in her captors' faces. Three men with hollow eyes and cruel smiles. Beyond them lay the rolling hills and pine forests she'd known all her 19 years, now growing more distant with each passing moment. "Where are you taking me?" Her voice emerged as a rasp. The man called Blackwood, who seemed to be their leader, grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Copper Creek. You'll fetch a fine price there, pretty thing like you." Emma felt ice spread through her veins. Copper Creek, the lawless mining town where desperate men outnumbered women 20 to 1, where girls disappeared into saloons and brothels, never to be seen again. "They'll be looking for me," she said, lifting her chin despite the fear threatening to choke her. Blackwood laughed, the sound as dry as dead leaves. "Ain't nobody left to look, girl. That homestead of yours is nothing but ashes now." The words hit her like physical blows. Ma, Pa, gone. The home they'd built with their bare hands, all gone. Emma closed her eyes, refusing to let these men see her tears. Later, she promised herself. Later she would grieve. Miles away, across the mountain ridge that separated the settler territories from lands still contested, Running Wolf stood at the edge of his people's camp. At 32 winters, he had already led his band of Western Apache for 6 seasons, earning respect not only for his skill in battle, but for his wisdom in navigating the ever-changing world around them. "Would the traders speak of trouble in the mining town?" said Grey Fox, his most trusted advisor, joining him at the ridge. "More white men arrive each day, searching for the yellow metal. They bring whiskey and discord." Running Wolf nodded, his eyes scanning the distant horizon where thin columns of smoke rose from Copper Creek. "And women?" he asked quietly. Grey Fox's expression darkened. "Few come willingly. There are men who trade in flesh, like the ones who took your sister." Running Wolf's jaw tightened, his hand moving unconsciously to the turquoise and silver pendant hanging at his chest. The last gift his sister had given him before she disappeared 5 winters ago, taken by men who preyed upon young women far from the protection of law. "The peace with the white settlers remains fragile," Grey Fox continued. "Oh, the soldiers at Fort Sullivan watch our every move. Yet they do nothing about these flesh traders," Running Wolf replied, bitterness edging his voice. "We will go to Copper Creek tomorrow. The Mexican traders will be there with supplies we need, and perhaps—" He did not finish the thought. "Perhaps news of a young Apache woman, sold years ago, whose brother had never stopped searching." As the sun climbed higher, Emma Caldwell and Running Wolf remained unaware of how their paths would soon cross, and how their meeting would forever change the course of both their lives. Copper Creek emerged from the Montana wilderness like an open wound, raw, festering with greed and lawlessness. The main street, little more than a muddy path lined with hastily constructed buildings, bustled with miners fresh from their claims, pockets heavy with dust and nuggets, eyes hungry for whiskey and whatever pleasures money could buy. Emma, still bound and now gagged with a filthy cloth, swayed atop Blackwood's horse as they rode down the center of town. 3 days of travel had left her exhausted, her nightdress torn and soiled, her face streaked with grime and dried tears, yet in her blue eyes a spark of defiance still burned. "Quite a catch, Blackwood," called a man from the boardwalk, tipping his hat mockingly. "Jenkins paying well these days." Blackwood spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dust. "Better than digging in the dirt all day. Girl like this will fetch top dollar." Emma's stomach twisted at their casual cruelty. She'd heard whispers of such things, young women snatched from homesteads or wagons, sold to the highest bidder in mining towns where no lawman dared interfere. But such horrors had seemed distant, unreal until now. They stopped before a 2-story building with painted windows and a garishly lettered sign, "The Copper Queen Saloon." A broad-shouldered man with a waxed mustache and expensive suit stepped onto the porch, eyes appraising Emma with the cold calculation of a butcher sizing up livestock. "Jenkins," Blackwood acknowledged with a nod. "Bring her around back," Jenkins replied, his voice surprisingly refined for a man of such disreputable business. "Tonight's auction is already drawing interest." Auction. The word echoed in Emma's mind as they dragged her toward a small outbuilding behind the saloon. Inside, a row of small cells lined one wall, most empty save for the last 2. In one, a Mexican girl no older than 15 huddled in the corner, dark eyes wide with terror. In the other, a woman with faded blonde hair stared vacantly at the wall as if her spirit had already fled. "Company for you," Blackwood sneered, shoving Emma into an empty cell. He cut the ropes at her wrists but left her ankles bound. "Jenkins will send someone to clean you up before the bidding starts." When they left, Emma immediately worked at the gag in her mouth, finally spitting it out. "Hello," she whispered to the other captives. "Do you speak English?" The Mexican girl looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Little," she managed. "I'm Emma. What's your name?" "Louisa," came the barely audible reply. The blonde woman didn't respond at all, didn't even blink. "We need to help each other," Emma said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "If we could get a message to the marshal in Fort Sullivan." A bitter laugh erupted from the blonde. "Marshal?" She finally spoke, her voice raspy from disuse. "Girl, There ain't no law that's coming to save you. Men like Jenkins own this town. Emma's brief spark of hope flickered. Mate, there must be someone. Save your strength, the woman advised, turning away again. You'll need it. 2 hours later, a sour-faced woman arrived with buckets of water and clean dresses, faded calico for Emma and Louisa, a gaudy red satin for the blonde. Jenkins wants you presentable, the woman explained without emotion. Wash yourselves. Put these on. Emma's fingers trembled as she scrubbed away days of grime and pulled the calico dress over her head. It hung loose on her frame, evidence of its previous owner's larger build. Still, the simple act of changing clothes made her feel minutely more human. When the woman returned to collect the buckets, Emma tried one more appeal. Please, I don't belong here. My parents were murdered. I need to reach the authorities. The woman's face softened almost imperceptibly. I'm sorry for you, girl. Truly, but talking like that will only earn you a beating. Best accept what's coming. As the door closed behind her, Emma sank to the floor, pressing her palms against her eyes to stem the tears threatening to fall. No, she would not accept this fate. Somehow, she would escape. She had to. Miles away, Running Wolf and a small party of his most trusted men rode toward Copper Creek. They were dressed not in traditional Apache clothing, but in a mixture of native and settler garments, cotton shirts, leather vests, and denim trousers traded from Mexican merchants, though Running Wolf still wore the turquoise pendant and kept his hair in 2 long braids. Remember, he cautioned his companions, we come as traders, not warriors. The white men fear us enough without giving them reason. Grey Fox nodded, though his eyes remained wary. And if we find news of Morning Flower? Running Wolf's sister had been barely 17 when she vanished, her beauty as delicate as her namesake. 5 years had passed, yet her memory remained as sharp as a blade in his heart. Then we listen only, Running Wolf replied, though the muscle in his jaw tightened. Ibrin, this is not the time for vengeance. They made camp for the night a mile outside of town, and as darkness fell, Running Wolf performed a small ceremony, burning sage and cedar, asking the Creator for guidance. Tomorrow they would enter Copper Creek, a place where Apaches were tolerated for their trade goods, but never welcomed. Unknown to Running Wolf, less than a mile away, Emma Caldwell was being led from her cell toward the back room of the Copper Queen's saloon. A crowd had gathered, men of all descriptions united by the same hungry look in their eyes. As Jenkins pushed her onto a small platform, Emma's gaze swept the room, searching for any face that might show compassion. There was none. "Gentlemen," Jenkins announced, his voice carrying above the murmurs and catcalls, "I present the first lot of the evening. Young, healthy, and spirited, a true frontier rose plucked from settler stock." Emma stood straight, refusing to cower despite the shame burning through her. Whatever happened tonight, she would not break. She would survive. And someday, somehow, she would make these men pay for what they had done. "Our bidding starts at $50, Jenkins declared, and the room erupted with raised hands and shouted numbers. Emma closed her eyes briefly, sending a desperate prayer skyward. If any mercy existed in this cruel world, let it find her now. The back room of the Copper Queen saloon stank of whiskey, sweat, and tobacco. Oil lamps cast sickly yellow light across the sea of faces turned toward the makeshift auction block where Emma stood. She fixed her gaze on a water stain on the far wall, trying to imagine herself elsewhere, back home, helping Ma with the washing, listening to Pa's stories by the hearth. Anything but here, being appraised like livestock. $50 for this fine specimen? Jenkins laughed, circling Emma like a predator. Gentlemen, look at her, unblemished skin, strong back, educated too, I'd wager. She'll read to you at night and warm your bed after. Emma's jaw clenched at the crude laughter that followed. 60, called a grizzled miner from the back. 75, countered a portly shopkeeper whose eyes never rose above Emma's chest. 100, declared a new voice, smooth as river stones. The crowd parted to reveal a man Emma instantly recognized as more dangerous than all the others combined. While the miners were rough with drink and desperation, this man's cruelty was calculating. He wore an elegant black suit, a gold watch chain draped across his vest, a thin scar traced from the corner of his right eye to his jaw. Mr. Hawkins, Jenkins acknowledged with a nod that bordered on deference. Always a pleasure to see Empire Mine taking an interest in our humble offerings. Emma suppressed a shudder. Everyone knew of the Empire Mine and its owner, Victor Hawkins. The largest operation in the territory, it was said to work men to death in its tunnels and dispose of bodies in abandoned shafts. And now this man's cold eyes were fixed on her. 120, someone else called, but their voice lacked conviction. 150, Hawkins countered lazily. The bidding continued, but with diminishing enthusiasm. Few dared compete with Hawkins, and those who did began to falter as the price climbed past $200. Emma's heart sank. The inevitability of her fate settled over her like a shroud. Outside the saloon, Running Wolf and his 4 companions made their way cautiously through Copper Creek's muddy street. Their arrival had not gone unnoticed. Heads turned, conversations halted, and hands drifted toward weapons as they passed. "The auction has already begun," Grey Fox murmured, nodding toward the crowd filing into the Copper Queen. "I heard 2 miners speaking of it." Running Wolf's expression remained impassive, though rage simmered beneath his composed exterior. "What of our trading? Has anyone seen Miguel?" The Mexican merchant they regularly dealt with had promised to meet them with supplies. "O'Brien, he waits at the general store," Swift Knife, the youngest of their group, reported, "but he says the whole town speaks of tonight's sale. A girl from a settler family, unusually beautiful." Running Wolf frowned. Another young life to be destroyed, another family shattered. The familiar ache of his sister's absence throbbed anew. "We should complete our business and leave this place," Longwalker advised. "No, these matters are not our concern." Running Wolf nodded slowly, but as they approached the general store, a commotion from the saloon caught his attention. A young Mexican girl was being dragged, screaming, toward the auction block. Her terror-stricken face triggered a memory so powerful that Running Wolf physically staggered. Morning Flower had looked just like that the last time he saw her. "Wait here," he commanded his companions, and before they could protest, he strode toward the saloon. Inside, Emma watched as Louisa was brought to stand beside her. The younger girl trembled visibly, tears streaming down her face. Emma reached for her hand, offering what little comfort she could. "Don't touch the merchandise." Jenkins snapped, slapping Emma's hand away. Victor Hawkins's thin lips curved in amusement. "I'm at 250 for the blonde. Shall we say 300 for the pair?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. Buying 2 women was a display of wealth few could match. 300 once, Jenkins called. 300 twice. 500. The new voice cut through the room like a blade. All heads turned toward the entrance, where a tall, broad-shouldered man stood. His copper skin and black braids marked him instantly as native, though his clothing was a mixture of traditional and settler garments. The turquoise pendant at his throat caught the lamplight, gleaming like a blue flame. A stunned silence fell over the room. Then Jenkins recovered, his professional smile returning. "Gentlemen, it seems we have an unexpected bidder. 500 for both women, from our Apache friend." Hawkins turned slowly, his face a mask of controlled fury. "This is a white man's establishment. The savage has no place here." Running Wolf's expression remained neutral, though his dark eyes blazed with intensity. From a leather pouch at his belt, he withdrew several pieces of turquoise and 2 small gold nuggets, placing them on a nearby table. 500, he repeated, his English precise but accented. "In goods valuable to your people." Jenkins' eyes darted between the Apache chief and Victor Hawkins, clearly calculating which man presented the greater threat. The turquoise alone was worth the asking price. The gold was merely a show of strength. Mr. Hawkins was bidding only on the blonde, Jenkins ventured. "Perhaps an arrangement." "Both?" Running Wolf interrupted. "And then I will take both women." Emma stared at the Apache, confusion warring with a desperate, fragile hope. His gaze met hers for a brief moment, and in his eyes she saw not the lust or cruelty she'd come to expect, but something else, a fierce determination she couldn't understand. Hawkins stepped forward, one hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "This is absurd." "I won't be outbid by a 600, Running Wolf said calmly, producing another gold nugget. The room grew tense, the air thick with the threat of violence. Then, unexpectedly, Hawkins laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Keep your squaws, Chief. There will be others." With a dismissive wave, he turned to Jenkins. "I'll take the blonde in the red dress instead." Jenkins, visibly relieved that bloodshed had been averted, nodded quickly. "Sold to our distinguished Apache visitor for 600 in trade goods. The 2 young ladies are yours." He gestured to his men. "Cut them loose." As a knife sliced through the ropes binding her wrists, Emma swayed on her feet, light-headed with shock and disbelief. What had just happened? Had she been saved or condemned to an even worse fate? Running Wolf approached the platform, his movements deliberate, non-threatening. "No, you are free to choose," he said, his voice low enough that only Emma and Louisa could hear. "I can take you to Fort Sullivan, or you may find sanctuary with my people until you decide your path." Emma searched his face, looking for deception, for hidden motives. She found only steadiness and a deep, banked anger that seemed directed not at her, but at the men who had brought her to this place. "Why?" she whispered. Running Wolf's gaze flickered to the pendant at his throat, then back to her. "Because no one did this for my sister." Outside, the night air hit Emma's face like a blessing after the stifling confines of the saloon. Running Wolf's companions waited with horses, their expressions grave but not unkind. As she mounted the offered horse, Emma looked back at the Copper Queen one last time. Through the window, she could see Victor Hawkins watching, his scarred face illuminated by lamplight, his eyes cold with promised retribution. This wasn't over, but for tonight, at least, she was free. They rode hard through the darkness, leaving Copper Creek behind. Emma clung to the saddle, her body aching from days of captivity followed by this punishing pace. Beside her, Louisa wept silently, the occasional sob escaping despite her efforts to remain quiet. The Apache warriors formed a protective circle around them, with Running Wolf leading and Grey Fox bringing up the rear, constantly scanning the trail behind them. No one spoke. The only sounds were the rhythmic thud of hooves on packed earth, the creak of leather, and the whisper of wind through the pines. Emma's mind raced with questions, fears, and fragmented memories of her parents' final moments. The grief she'd held at bay now threatened to overwhelm her, but she fought it back. Later, she told herself, survive first, mourn, Later. After what seemed like hours, Running Wolf raised his hand, signaling a halt. They had reached a small clearing beside a stream, sheltered by a rocky outcropping that would hide their fire from distant eyes. "We rest here," he announced, dismounting in one fluid motion. "Swift Knife, Long Walker, secure the perimeter. Grey Fox, tend the horses." His companions moved with practiced efficiency, establishing a camp with minimal conversation. Emma slid awkwardly from her horse, her legs nearly buckling when they hit the ground. Running Wolf appeared at her side, steadying her with a firm but gentle hand. "Thank you," she managed, though the words seemed woefully inadequate for what he had done. He nodded once, then turned to help Louisa, who was struggling to dismount. The younger girl shrank from his touch at first, then relented, allowing him to lift her down. "She fears me," Running Wolf observed, his expression unreadable. "She fears all men right now," Emma replied softly. "As do I." Something flickered in his dark eyes, understanding, perhaps, or shared pain. "You have reason, but no harm will come to you here." While the men prepared a small fire and set up bedrolls, Emma coaxed Louisa to the stream's edge. They washed their faces and hands in the cold water, the simple act bringing a measure of comfort after days of filth and fear. "What will happen to us?" Louisa whispered in her halting English. "These men. They take us to their village." Emma glanced back at the camp. Running Wolf was deep in conversation with Grey Fox, their profiles sharp against the firelight. "I don't know," she admitted, "but he offered us a choice. Fort Sullivan or sanctuary with his people." "Soldiers at Fort might send me back to Mexico," Louisa said, fear darkening her eyes. "My father sold me to men who brought me north." "I cannot go home." Emma's heart ached for the girl, who couldn't be more than 15. "Then we'll find another way. Together." When they returned to the fire, Swift Knife offered them strips of dried meat and flat bread. Emma accepted gratefully, suddenly aware of her gnawing hunger. As they ate, she studied their rescuers more carefully. Running Wolf appeared to be in his early 30s, his face weathered by sun and wind, yet handsome in a severe way. His companions were varied: Grey Fox older and wiry, Swift Knife barely out of boyhood, Long Walker massive and solemn, and Spotted Elk, who had said nothing yet, middle-aged with knowing eyes. "You said something about your sister," Emma ventured when the meal was finished, addressing Running Wolf directly. "Or do you in the saloon?" The camp grew quiet. Running Wolf touched the turquoise pendant at his throat, a gesture Emma was beginning to recognize as habitual. "Morning Flower," he said, the name soft as a prayer. "5 winters ago, she was taken by men like those who took you. She was gathering plants beyond our hunting grounds. I was supposed to watch over her, but I was tracking deer." His voice remained steady, but Emma saw the pain etched in the lines around his eyes. "When I returned, I found signs of struggle, horse tracks leading toward the mining settlements." "You searched for her," Emma said. "It wasn't a question." He nodded. "Every trading journey, every meeting with white settlers, I ask about a young Apache woman sold in the Northern Territories. Some claim to have seen her in Helena, others in Dakota Territory. Always the trail grows cold." Emma's throat tightened. "I'm sorry. The men who took her took you. They see only bodies to use, not people with spirits, with families." Running Wolf's voice hardened. "When I heard about tonight's auction, I remembered my sister's face. I could not walk away." Louisa had drifted to sleep, curled beneath a blanket Grey Fox had provided. Emma remained by the fire, exhaustion pulling at her limbs, yet unable to surrender to sleep. "What will happen now?" she asked. Running Wolf studied her across the flames. "That depends on you. Fort Sullivan is 2 days. Ride east. My people's current camp is 3 days northwest, in the valley beyond Eagle Peak. And if Hawkins sends men after us, a grim smile touched his lips. They would be unwise to follow an Apache war party into the mountains. Is that what you are? A war party? We are traders, he replied. But we remember how to be warriors when necessary. Emma nodded, drawing the borrowed blanket tighter around her shoulders. The night had grown cold, and despite the fire, she couldn't stop shivering, a bone-deep chill born of exhaustion and delayed shock. You should rest, Running Wolf said, his tone gentler. Tomorrow's journey will be difficult. Emma lay down near Louisa, but sleep eluded her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's body on the floor of their cabin, her mother's crumpled form, Blackwood's leering face, Victor Hawkins's cold stare. Silent tears tracked down her temples, soaking into the makeshift pillow Grey Fox had fashioned from a folded blanket. Sometime later, she became aware of someone sitting beside her. Opening her eyes, she found Running Wolf there, keeping watch as the others slept. The memories hunt you, he observed quietly. Yes, there seemed no point in denying it. After my sister vanished, I could not sleep for many nights. The thoughts circled like vultures. He paused, looking up at the star-strewn sky. My grandmother taught me to name the stars in our language. When the thoughts became too loud, I would recite their names. It helped. It was such an unexpected suggestion, so human and vulnerable, that Emma felt something shift inside her, a hairline crack in the wall of fear she'd built around herself. Will you teach me one? She asked. Running Wolf pointed to a particularly bright star low on the horizon. We call that one Firewalker. It guides travelers home. Firewalker, Emma repeated, the unfamiliar syllables awkward on her tongue. Running Wolf's mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. Sleep now, Emma Caldwell. You are safe tonight. And somehow, despite everything, she believed him. At dawn, they broke camp quickly and continued their journey, moving deeper into the mountains where the pine forests grew thick and the air tasted of resin and wild sage. Emma, feeling marginally stronger after a night's rest, kept Louisa close, teaching her English words for the things they passed: boulder, squirrel, pine cone. Around midday, Swift Knife, who had been scouting ahead, returned at a gallop. Riders, he reported tersely. 6 men following our trail. 1 wears a black coat. Running Wolf's expression darkened. Hawkins. He does not surrender what he considers his, Grey Fox observed grimly. Emma's newfound sense of security evaporated. She looked at Running Wolf, saw the calculation in his eyes as he weighed their options. We cannot outrun them with the women, Long Walker said. We must stand and fight. No. Running Wolf's decision was immediate. We will not risk their lives in battle. He turned to Emma, his gaze intense. The time for choosing has come sooner than I expected. Fort Sullivan lies beyond that eastern ridge. My people's camp is hidden in the valley to the north. Which path will you take? Emma looked from Running Wolf to the distant ridge, then down at Louisa's frightened face. In that moment, she realized that regardless of which direction they fled, Hawkins would follow. Their very presence put Running Wolf and his men at risk. Unless they separated, Louisa should go with you, she said quietly. She has no one waiting at the fort, and they might send her back to Mexico, to the father who sold her. Running Wolf studied her intently. And you? Emma straightened her shoulders, summoning courage from some hidden reserve. I'll ride for Fort Sullivan. Hawkins will follow me, not you. He wants me, not Louisa. She met his gaze steadily. This is the only way to protect her and to repay the debt I owe you. You owe no debt, Running Wolf countered, and Hawkins is dangerous. So am I, Emma replied, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. I survived Blackwood. I survived the auction. I'll survive Hawkins too. A look of respect, and something else she couldn't name, flashed across Running Wolf's face. For a long moment, he was silent, considering. Then he nodded once a decision made. We ride together to the fork in Thunder Canyon, he said. There you will take the path to Fort Sullivan. We will ensure Hawkins follows you, then circle back to protect your flank. He held her gaze. You will not face him alone. Relief and gratitude washed over Emma. She nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in her throat. As they mounted their horses, Running Wolf handed her a small knife in a leather sheath. Keep this close, he advised. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and Emma felt a jolt of something, not fear, something warmer, more complicated. Thank you, she said, and they both knew she meant for more than just the knife. Thunder Canyon earned its name honestly. Even on this clear day, the sheer rock walls seemed to amplify every sound, the rush of the narrow stream below, the clatter of loose stones beneath the horses, hooves, the call of a hawk circling overhead. Emma rode beside Running Wolf at the head of their small party, her body tense with anticipation. They had pushed hard since spotting Hawkins's men, and the horses were beginning to show signs of fatigue. The fork lies just ahead, Running Wolf said, gesturing toward a bend in the canyon. Beyond it, the eastern path climbs to the ridge. From there, you can see Fort Sullivan in the valley below. Emma nodded, her throat dry. The reality of their imminent separation pressed upon her. 3 days ago, these men had been strangers, frightening ones at that. Now, the thought of continuing alone filled her with dread. Louisa rode closer, her young face solemn. Since learning of the plan, she had withdrawn into silence, her dark eyes watchful. You will be safe with them, Emma assured her in a low voice. Running Wolf keeps his word. You should come too, Louisa whispered. The white soldiers, they may not believe you, or they may not care. The same fear had gnawed at Emma through the sleepless hours of the previous night. Fort Sullivan's reputation was mixed at best. Some said Captain Harrison Thornton ran a disciplined outpost that offered fair treatment to settlers and natives alike. Others claimed the fort was as corrupt as Copper Creek, with soldiers turning a blind eye to the territory's darker dealings, especially when those dealings benefited them. But Emma had made her choice. Hawkins wants me specifically, she replied. Die as long as he's hunting me. You'll have a chance to reach safety. They reached the fork, a natural split where the canyon widened briefly before dividing around a massive boulder. The eastern path rose sharply upward, while the northern route continued deeper into Apache territory. Running Wolf raised his hand, signaling a halt. Swift Knife, what news of our pursuers? The young warrior had been periodically dropping back to monitor their trail. They come slowly but steadily. The man in black leads them. How far? Less than an hour behind. Running Wolf nodded, his expression grim. Not enough time for a proper ambush. He turned to Grey Fox. Take Louisa and the others north. Make for Eagle Pass. I will follow once I've seen Emma safely to the ridge. Grey Fox's weathered face registered surprise. You would split our strength. I gave my word that she would not face Hawkins alone. The older man studied his chief for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. As you wish. We will wait for you at Whispering Pines. Emma dismounted to say goodbye to Louisa, embracing the younger girl tightly. Stay strong, she murmured. Perhaps we'll meet again? Louisa clung to her briefly, then pulled back with unexpected determination in her eyes. "I will learn English properly," she declared, "and how to ride, to fight like you." Despite everything, Emma smiled. "I'm no warrior, Louisa." "You are," the girl insisted. "Inside." She touched her own heart. "Here." The Apache warriors prepared to depart, checking their weapons and adjusting their horses' tack. Grey Fox approached Emma, regarding her solemnly. "You have a brave spirit," he said, his English more halting than Running Wolf's. "May the Creator watch over your path." "Thank you," Emma replied, touched by the blessing, "for everything." As the others disappeared down the northern fork, Running Wolf turned to Emma. "We must move quickly. The ridge is steep, and your horse is tired." They set off at a brisk pace, the trail narrowing as it climbed. The sun beat down mercilessly, and sweat trickled between Emma's shoulder blades, plastering the borrowed calico dress to her skin. Her mare labored beneath her, breathing heavily. Running Wolf rode slightly ahead, alert for any sign of danger. From this angle, Emma could study him more freely, the broad set of his shoulders, the straight line of his back, the careful way he held himself, neither tense nor relaxed, but perfectly balanced. Ready. "How did you learn English so well?" she asked, partly to distract herself from her growing apprehension, partly out of genuine curiosity. He glanced back. "I spent 2 seasons at a mission school as a boy, before the wars with your people intensified. You chose to return to your tribe?" A shadow crossed his face, not by choice. The mission was burned by settlers who feared educated Indians. Emma flushed with shame. "I'm sorry. You did not hold the torch," he said simply. Then, after a pause, "Later, I traded with Mexicans and white settlers. Languages come easily to me." They had climbed high enough now that Emma could see back down the canyon. Her heart lurched as she spotted movement far below, riders entering the fork they had left minutes ago. "Hawkins," she breathed. Running Wolf nodded. "They will see our tracks splitting. We must give them reason to follow yours." "How?" "Make yourself visible. When they reach the fork, they must see you, not my people." Emma swallowed hard. "You want me to show myself deliberately, make myself a target?" "Yes." His dark eyes held hers steadily. "I will be hidden watching. If they pursue, I will follow. You will have a head start to the fort." It was a dangerous plan, relying heavily on timing and Hawkins's predictable obsession. But Emma saw the logic. She straightened in the saddle, gathering her courage. "I'll do it." They positioned themselves carefully on a switchback high enough to be visible from below, but with enough lead that pursuit would be difficult. Running Wolf dismounted, leading his horse behind an outcropping of rock. "And when they appear at the fork, ride forward to that exposed ledge," he instructed, pointing to a barren stretch of trail. "Make sure they see you, then continue upward. Do not wait for me." Emma nodded, her mouth dry. "And if something goes wrong?" Running Wolf withdrew a second knife from his belt, this one longer than the one he'd given her earlier. "Then we fight." For a moment, neither spoke. The weight of their brief but intense shared journey hung between them. Then, impulsively, Emma reached out and touched the turquoise pendant at his throat. "For luck," she said softly. Running Wolf's hand closed over hers, warm and calloused. "Luck is for gamblers," he replied. "We have something stronger." "What's that?" "Purpose." He released her hand and stepped back. "Now go. Show yourself to our enemies, Emma Caldwell. Let them see what they cannot possess." Emma rode forward, her heart pounding. Below, 6 riders had reached the fork and were examining the ground. She urged her tired mare onto the exposed ledge, making no attempt to conceal herself. The reaction was immediate. A shout went up, and Hawkins himself pointed directly at her. Even from this distance, she could feel the chill of his hatred. She had been seen. The game was now in motion, and her life was the prize. Emma urged her exhausted mare upward, rocks skittering beneath the animal's hooves as they climbed the steep trail. Behind her, Hawkins and his men had abandoned caution for speed, their shouts echoing off the canyon walls as they began their pursuit. Her plan had worked, perhaps too well. "Faster," she whispered, leaning forward in the saddle. "And just a little faster." The ridge loomed above, tantalizingly close, yet still beyond reach. Her mare stumbled, recovered, then pressed on with the last reserves of its strength. Emma risked a glance backward and immediately wished she hadn't. The distance between her and the pursuers was closing rapidly. A sharp crack split the air, a gunshot. The bullet struck rock near Emma's head, sending fragments flying. Her mare shied violently, nearly unseating her. Emma clutched the saddle horn, heart pounding as she fought to control the panicked animal. "Keep shooting, and you might hit her, you fool," Hawkins's voice carried clearly. "I want her alive!" The momentary reprieve from gunfire allowed Emma to regain control and continue upward. The switchback trail turned sharply, briefly concealing her from her pursuers. In that instant of cover, a strong hand reached out from behind a boulder, grabbing her horse's bridle. "This way," Running Wolf commanded, leading her off the main trail onto a narrow, nearly invisible path that wound between massive rocks. Emma hesitated only a fraction of a second before following. "Oh, they'll see our tracks, not if they're looking elsewhere." Running Wolf raised his bow and loosed an arrow that arced high before disappearing over the ridge. Almost immediately, he fired a second arrow in a different direction. From below came confused shouts as Hawkins's men spotted the arrows. "He's up there! The Apache's trying to flank us! Split up!" "Two men follow the girl's trail, the rest with me." Running Wolf nodded with grim satisfaction. "Now we move." They pressed deeper into the rocky labyrinth, the trail so narrow that Emma's knees occasionally brushed stone on either side. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew distant, then faded entirely. After several tense minutes, the path widened into a small, sheltered hollow ringed by juniper trees. A tiny spring bubbled from the rocks, forming a clear pool before disappearing underground again. "We rest the horses briefly," Running Wolf decided, dismounting in one fluid motion, "then continue north." "North!" Emma frowned as she slid from her saddle, legs trembling with fatigue. "But Fort Sullivan is east. Hawkins expects you to flee east." Running Wolf led both horses to the spring. "Or do we circle north, then approach the fort from the west after nightfall?" Emma sank onto a boulder, suddenly aware of how her entire body ached. "They'll be watching all approaches, not as carefully as they should." A ghost of a smile touched Running Wolf's lips. "White men rarely look up." Despite everything, Emma found herself returning his smile. "You intend to scale the ridge?" "There is a hunter's path." Difficult, but passable. He offered her his water skin. "Drink. The climb ahead requires strength." Emma accepted gratefully, the water cool and sweet on her parched throat. As she drank, she studied Running Wolf more carefully. He showed no sign of fear, though he must have known the danger they faced. 6 armed men against 1 Apache warrior and an exhausted woman were not favorable odds. "Why are you doing this?" she asked finally. "You could have gone with your people, kept Louisa safe, left me to make my own way." Running Wolf's expression grew distant. "I told you of my sister." "Yes, but what I did not tell you is that I had a chance to save her." His voice remained level, but Emma saw pain flash across his face. "A trader brought word of an auction in Helena. I was 3 days away. I chose tribal matters instead, believing there would be another opportunity. He looked directly at Emma, his dark eyes intense. There was not. Emma's throat tightened with understanding. So I'm your redemption. No. The word was sharp, definitive. You are not my sister. Your life is your own, but I will not make the same mistake twice. Before Emma could respond, Running Wolf tensed, head tilting slightly as he listened. Horses. They're coming closer. They moved quickly, leading their mounts deeper into the hollow, where overhanging rock provided cover. Scarcely breathing, they waited as hoofbeats approached, then slowed. "Tracks end here," a gruff voice announced. One of Hawkins's men. "They can't have vanished," replied another. "Check behind those rocks." Running Wolf silently drew his knife, motioning for Emma to stay put. She shook her head, drawing her own smaller blade. Whatever happened, she would not cower helplessly again. Footsteps crunched on loose stone, growing nearer. A shadow fell across the entrance to their hiding place. Emma gripped her knife tighter, heart hammering against her ribs. A bearded face appeared, one of the men from the auction. His eyes widened with surprise, then triumph as he spotted them. "Here!" he shouted. "Udrin I found." His cry cut off abruptly as Running Wolf surged forward, knife flashing. The man staggered backward, clutching his throat, blood seeping between his fingers. His companion appeared, revolver raised, but Emma was already moving. She launched herself at him, her small blade driving into his upper arm. The man howled, the gun discharging harmlessly into the dirt as he fell. Running Wolf was on him instantly, delivering a sharp blow to the temple that rendered him unconscious. He looked up at Emma, a new respect in his eyes. "You fight well for one untrained." She stared at her bloodied knife, trembling slightly. "I've never stabbed anyone before." "Yet you did not hesitate." Running Wolf quickly bound the unconscious man with leather strips from his saddlebag. The other lay motionless, his eyes staring sightlessly skyward. "This one will live to report to Hawkins. It buys us time." Emma nodded numbly, wiping her blade clean on the grass. Something fundamental had shifted within her. 3 days ago, she had been a settler's daughter, her life mapped out along safe, predictable lines. Now she had killed a man, or helped to kill him. The boundaries that had once defined her existence were dissolving, leaving her in unknown territory. "We must go," Running Wolf urged, already moving toward the horses. "The gunshot will draw the others." They mounted quickly and set off at a canter, leaving the hollow behind. The sun had begun its westward descent, painting the landscape in lengthening shadows. They rode in silence, each processing what had just occurred. After some time, Running Wolf spoke. "The first killing changes a person. This is true for my people as well." Emma kept her eyes on the trail ahead. "Does it get easier?" "It should not," he replied simply. "That is what separates warriors from murderers." His words settled over her like a blanket, not comforting exactly, but solid, real. In a world that had become chaotic and uncertain, Running Wolf's directness was something she could grasp. As they crested a small rise, Emma caught sight of something in the distance, a flagpole flying the stars and stripes, just visible above the trees. "Fort Sullivan. We have arrived sooner than expected," Running Wolf observed, "but the approach remains dangerous. We will wait for darkness." Emma nodded, feeling a strange reluctance as she gazed at the symbol of supposed safety. Fort Sullivan represented a return to the world she knew, a world that suddenly felt foreign. Beside her, Running Wolf seemed to sense her hesitation. Second thoughts, Emma Caldwell. "Not about escaping Hawkins," she clarified, "but about everything else." She met his gaze directly. that I'm not the same person who was taken from her home. No, he agreed, studying her with those penetrating eyes. You are becoming someone stronger. As the sun sank lower and they prepared for the final leg of their journey, Emma wondered if he was right, and whether the woman she was becoming would find any place in the world that awaited her beyond the fort's walls. Dusk settled over the Montana landscape, transforming the world into shades of indigo and shadow. Emma and Running Wolf had concealed themselves in a dense stand of pines overlooking Fort Sullivan, watching as lamps were lit within the stockade walls and soldiers completed their evening routines. The fort wasn't large, a collection of wooden buildings arranged around a central parade ground, enclosed by a perimeter of sharpened logs. 2 guards patrolled the main gate, rifles propped casually against their shoulders. Not very vigilant, Emma observed quietly. Running Wolf nodded. They do not expect trouble. The nearest Blackfoot camp is 3 days' ride north, and they believe my people are far to the west. What about Hawkins and his men? They will search the eastern trails first. When they find nothing, they will widen their hunt. He studied the fort with narrowed eyes. But we cannot linger. Dawn will bring fresh trackers. As darkness deepened, they left their horses secured in a hidden gully and made their way carefully downhill. Running Wolf moved like a shadow, each step precise and silent. Emma tried to mimic his movements, wincing whenever a twig snapped beneath her feet. "Sorry," she whispered after a particularly loud crack. "You are not Apache," he replied, without unkindness. "No one expects you to move like one." They reached the edge of the cleared area surrounding the fort. Beyond the open ground, the main gate stood illuminated by torchlight. The 2 guards now engaged in conversation, their attention focused inward. Running Wolf touched Emma's arm, pointing to a section of wall partially hidden by shadow. "There, the logs meet poorly. You can slip through." "What about you?" He shook his head. "I will not enter the fort." Though she had known this moment would come, Emma felt unprepared for the finality of his words. "You're leaving. My presence would complicate matters for you." An Apache warrior inside Fort Sullivan would raise questions you do not need. He reached inside his buckskin shirt and withdrew a small object, pressing it into her palm. "Take this." Emma looked down at a turquoise stone wrapped in intricate silver wire, a smaller version of the pendant he wore. "I can't accept—" "It was my sister's," he interrupted. "She made 2 before she was taken. This one she intended for her future husband." A sad smile touched his lips. She was young, full of dreams. Emma closed her fingers around the pendant, overwhelmed by the significance of the gift. "Why give it to me?" Running Wolf held her gaze, his dark eyes reflecting the distant torchlight. "Because you survived, because you fought. And because I believe you will continue to fight, not just for yourself, but for others who cannot." The weight of his expectation settled on her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a purpose. "I'll try to find information about your sister," she promised. "The world has likely taken her beyond finding," he said softly. "But I would know her fate, if possible." For a moment, they stood in silence, the night air cool between them. So much remained unsaid. Questions, gratitude, a strange reluctance to part that Emma couldn't fully explain, even to herself. "Will I see you again?" she asked finally. "If the Creator wills it." Running Wolf's expression was solemn, but something warmed in his eyes. "The Apache camp at Eagle Peak is known to those at the fort. If you have need, send word." Emma nodded, suddenly finding it difficult to speak past the tightness in her throat. "Thank you for everything." In answer, Running Wolf reached out, his hand hovering near her face before gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. A gesture so unexpected, so tender, that Emma's breath caught. Then he stepped back, melting into the shadows with a warrior's grace. "Be strong, Emma Caldwell." His voice came softly from the darkness. "You are more than what was done to you." And then he was gone. Emma stood motionless for several heartbeats, her fingers clutching the turquoise pendant. Then, drawing a deep breath, she turned toward the fort. It was time to rejoin her world, or what remained of it. The gap in the wall was exactly where Running Wolf had indicated. Emma squeezed through, the rough logs snagging her dress as she emerged inside the stockade. Torches illuminated the parade ground, where a few soldiers still lingered despite the late hour. None seemed to notice her arrival. She walked toward the nearest building, trying to appear purposeful rather than furtive. A sign above the door read, "Headquarters." Inside, she found a narrow hallway leading to an office where a young lieutenant sat at a desk, sorting through papers. He looked up at her entrance, surprise registering on his face. "Ma'am, how did you—" He broke off, taking in her appearance, the ill-fitting calico dress, the dirt and scratches, the tangled hair. "Are you all right?" "I need to speak with your commanding officer," Emma said, her voice steadier than she expected. "My name is Emma Caldwell. I was abducted from my family's homestead 4 days ago. My parents were murdered." The lieutenant's expression shifted from confusion to concern. He rose quickly. "Of course, Miss Caldwell. Captain Thornton is still in his quarters. I'll take you to him immediately." As they crossed the parade ground, Emma felt the stares of the soldiers they passed. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to something more unsettling, the same hungry look she had seen at the auction. She straightened her spine, refusing to shrink beneath their gaze. The captain's quarters were in a separate building near the eastern wall. The lieutenant knocked briskly, and a deep voice responded from within, "Enter." Captain Harrison Thornton was not what Emma had expected. Tall and broad-shouldered, he had the bearing of a career military man, but his face was weathered by sun and hardship rather than age. He couldn't have been more than 40. When they entered, he was seated at a small desk, a half-empty whiskey glass at his elbow and a letter in his hand. "Lieutenant Pierce," he acknowledged, setting the letter aside. Then his gaze fell on Emma, and his eyebrows rose. "Who is this?" "Miss Emma Caldwell, sir. She says she was abducted from her homestead. Her parents were murdered." Captain Thornton studied her carefully, his grey eyes revealing nothing of his thoughts. "Thank you, Lieutenant. That will be all." Pierce hesitated. "Sir, should I fetch the doctor?" "Miss Caldwell appears—" "I said that will be all, Lieutenant." With a reluctant nod, Pierce withdrew, closing the door behind him. Captain Thornton gestured to a chair opposite his desk. "Please, sit. You look ready to collapse." Emma sank into the chair gratefully, the events of the past days suddenly catching up with her. "Thank you, Captain. Now, Miss Caldwell, tell me what happened." From the beginning, she recounted the attack on her family's homestead, the journey to Copper Creek, the auction. She described Blackwood and Jenkins, but deliberately avoided mentioning Running Wolf or the Apache tribe, saying only that she had escaped during transport and made her way to the fort alone. Throughout her narrative, Captain Thornton remained expressionless, occasionally jotting notes on a pad of paper. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, regarding her thoughtfully. "I'm sorry for your ordeal, Miss Caldwell. Truly, the territory has become increasingly lawless despite our best efforts. Will you send men to arrest Blackwood and Jenkins?" Emma asked. "To investigate the auction. There were other women." "I have limited jurisdiction and even more limited manpower," Thornton interrupted. A copper creek is 3 days' hard ride from here, in country controlled by mining interests with their own arrangements. Emma stared at him, disbelief giving way to anger. "You're saying you won't do anything?" The captain's expression hardened slightly. "I'm saying there are realities you may not fully comprehend. Victor Hawkins, for instance, has connections in Helena that reach all the way to the territorial governor." "Hawkins tried to buy me," Emma said flatly, "like I was cattle. And yet here you are." Thornton took a sip of whiskey. "Consider yourself fortunate, Miss Caldwell. Many women in your situation never escape." The casual dismissal stung like a slap. Emma leaned forward, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "Captain Thornton, there is a criminal enterprise operating openly in Copper Creek. Women are being sold into servitude, or worse. My parents were murdered because of it. Surely that warrants action." Thornton sighed, setting down his glass. "Miss Caldwell, you've been through a traumatic experience. You need rest, proper clothing, time to grieve your parents. In the morning, we'll discuss arrangements to transport you to Helena, where you have a family, perhaps?" "No." The word emerged sharper than she intended. "I have no one." Something like pity crossed the captain's face. "I see. Well, there are charitable organizations for young women in your situation. I'm sure they can assist you in finding suitable employment or perhaps a husband." The implication was clear. Without family or means, her options were severely limited. She was expected to gratefully accept whatever scraps of security society offered, to forget what she had endured, to stop asking inconvenient questions. Emma's hand moved to her pocket, where Running Wolf's pendant rested against her palm like a talisman. His words echoed in her mind. "You are more than what was done to you." "I appreciate your concern, Captain," she said carefully. "But I believe justice for my parents and for the other women still captive should take precedence over my personal comfort." Thornton's expression cooled. "Justice is my concern, Miss Caldwell, not yours. Now, I'll have Lieutenant Pierce show you to quarters where you can rest. We'll speak again in the morning." It was a dismissal, plain and simple. Emma rose, recognizing the futility of further argument, for now. But as she followed Lieutenant Pierce to a small room near the infirmary, a resolution took shape within her. Captain Thornton might consider the matter closed, but she did not. One way or another, she would find justice for her parents, for Louisa, for the blonde woman with vacant eyes, and for Morning Flower, even if she had to do it herself. Dawn brought no clarity to Fort Sullivan, only a grey drizzle that turned the parade ground to mud and matched Emma's somber mood. She had spent a restless night on a narrow cot in a storage room, hastily converted to temporary quarters, her dreams haunted by fragmented images, her mother's crumpled form, Louisa's tearful face, Running Wolf disappearing into darkness. A young private had delivered clean clothes shortly after sunrise, a simple blouse and skirt that hung loose on her frame, likely donated by an officer's wife. Emma dressed gratefully, though she kept the turquoise pendant concealed beneath her collar. Some gifts were too precious to display carelessly. Lieutenant Pierce arrived as she finished plaiting her damp hair. "Miss Caldwell," he greeted her with a respectful nod. "Captain Thornton requests your presence at breakfast." Emma followed him across the compound to the officers' mess, acutely aware of the stares that tracked her progress. Word of her arrival had clearly spread, spawning curiosity and speculation among the soldiers. The mess hall was sparsely populated at this hour. Captain Thornton sat alone at a corner table, reviewing documents while he ate. He rose at Emma's approach, gesturing to the chair opposite his. "Miss Caldwell, I trust you slept well?" "As well as could be expected," she replied, taking the offered seat. A server appeared with a plate of eggs, bacon and biscuits that made Emma's stomach growl despite her apprehension. "I've sent a telegraph to Helena," Thornton informed her, sliding a cup of coffee in her direction. "The Women's Aid Society can arrange accommodations for you on the next eastbound stage." Emma set down her fork. "You've decided my future rather quickly, Captain. I'm merely offering assistance." His tone remained cordial, but Emma detected an underlying firmness. A young woman alone in the territories faces limited prospects. "And what of the investigation into my parents' murder?" "Into the auction at Copper Creek," Thornton's expression tightened. "As I explained yesterday, these matters are complicated by jurisdictional issues. Rest assured, I've noted your allegations." "Allegations?" Emma's voice rose slightly. "Captain, I witnessed these crimes firsthand." "Of course," he conceded smoothly. Poor choice of words. "Nevertheless, the practical constraints remain." Emma studied him carefully, the carefully neutral expression, the way his eyes never quite met hers when discussing Copper Creek. "You already knew," she realized aloud, "about the auctions, about Jenkins and Hawkins." A flicker of something, guilt, annoyance, crossed Thornton's face before it settled back into professional detachment. "Miss Caldwell, the territories are developing under unique circumstances. The Army's role is to maintain peace and protect settlers from hostile natives, not to police every mining town's moral failings." "Moral failings?" Emma repeated incredulously. "Murder and human trafficking are not moral failing. Captain, they're crimes." Thornton leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You would be wise to moderate your tone, Miss Caldwell. Your situation is precarious." A young woman making wild accusations against powerful men might find herself labeled hysterical or worse. The threat, however veiled, was unmistakable. Emma fell silent, forcing herself to eat, despite the knot of anger tightening in her stomach. She needed strength for whatever lay ahead, and antagonizing Thornton further would only limit her options. After breakfast, Lieutenant Pierce offered to show her the fort's small library. "You might find it helps pass the time until arrangements are made for your departure," he suggested. Emma accepted gratefully, sensing an opportunity to gather information. The lieutenant was young, perhaps 25, with an open, earnest face that suggested he might be more forthcoming than his superior. The library was little more than a small room with 2 bookshelves and a writing desk, but it offered privacy. As Pierce pointed out various volumes, Emma ventured a careful question. "Lieutenant, how long have you been stationed at Fort Sullivan?" "Nearly 2 years, Miss Caldwell. And in that time, have you ever heard reports about women being traded in the territory?" Pierce's hand stilled on the book he was holding. "Or that's not a suitable topic for a lady's ears, Miss Caldwell." "My ears have already heard far worse, Lieutenant," she replied quietly. "Please, I need to understand." He hesitated, then sighed, setting the book down. "There are rumors, whispers about certain mining towns, but nothing official crosses the captain's desk." "Nothing?" "Not even when girls go missing from settler homesteads or native camps." The lieutenant's expression grew troubled. "The captain says those are civilian matters or tribal disputes, not military concerns." "And you believe that?" Pierce glanced toward the door, then lowered his voice. 2 months ago, a trapper came through with his daughter, pretty girl, about 16. They stayed one night at the fort, then headed for Copper Creek where the trapper had business. His jaw tightened. "A week later, I saw the trapper return alone. When I asked about his daughter, he claimed she'd married a shopkeeper's son. But he couldn't look me in the eye, and his pockets were suspiciously full." Emma's stomach churned with disgust. "He sold her." "I believe so, yes." Pierce ran a hand through his hair, his distress evident. I tried to discuss it with Captain Thornton, but he dismissed my concerns as speculation. Why? Emma pressed. Why would he ignore such crimes? Pierce hesitated again, then spoke even more softly. Empire Mine supplies most of the fort's extra provisions, goods that never appear on official manifests. Captain Thornton has a brother-in-law who works as Hawkins's accountant in Helena. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Not just indifference and then, but active complicity. The fort, this supposed outpost of law and civilization, was compromised by the very criminals it should be fighting. Are there others who share your concerns? Emma asked. A few. Sergeant Miller. The doctor, Abigail Ward. She's one of the few female physicians in the territory. They've seen things that trouble them. Emma nodded slowly, a plan beginning to form in her mind. Lieutenant Pierce, I'd like to speak with Dr. Ward, if possible. She's tending to a patient in the infirmary now, but I could introduce you this afternoon. Thank you. Emma offered him a genuine smile, for your honesty and for your conscience. Pierce looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the praise. I enlisted to protect people. Miss Caldwell. All people. He cleared his throat. I should return to my duties. Will you be all right on your own? I believe I will, Emma replied, her gaze falling on the fort's small collection of maps stored on the bottom shelf. I have some reading to occupy me. After Pierce departed, Emma quickly located a territorial map, spreading it across the desk. Her finger traced the route from Fort Sullivan to Copper Creek, then north to the Apache territories where Running Wolf's people were camped. A plan was taking shape, one that required allies, information, and courage. But first, she needed to speak with the doctor. Perhaps Abigail Ward would know something about a young Apache woman who had disappeared 5 years ago, sold into the same dark trade that had nearly claimed Emma herself. The infirmary occupied a long, narrow building near the eastern wall of Fort Sullivan. Unlike the other structures, its windows were large and numerous, allowing light and fresh air to circulate, though today's persistent drizzle had forced them closed, lending the space a close, antiseptic smell. Dr. Abigail Ward was nothing like the matronly figure Emma had imagined. She was tall and slender, perhaps 35, with sharp green eyes and auburn hair pulled back in a severe bun. She moved with brisk efficiency between beds, checking bandages and administering medications with competent hands. Miss Caldwell, she greeted Emma, her voice low and educated. Lieutenant Pierce mentioned you wished to speak with me. Yes, if you have time. My patients are stable for the moment. She gestured toward a small office at the far end of the ward. We can talk privately there. The office was neat and orderly, with medical textbooks lining the walls and anatomical drawings pinned beside a large map of the territory. Dr. Ward closed the door behind them, offering Emma a chair before settling behind her desk. Lieutenant Pierce said you escaped a trafficking operation. She began without preamble. How badly were you hurt? The directness caught Emma off guard. I wasn't. Not physically, at least. Dr. Ward's eyes narrowed slightly. You're fortunate. Most girls who come through that system aren't so lucky. She opened a drawer, withdrawing a small notebook. I've been documenting cases, dates, names when possible, physical conditions, locations, evidence. Emma leaned forward, hope kindling in her chest. You've treated victims of the auctions. 7 in the past year. Women who managed to escape or were discarded when they became too ill or injured to be useful. The doctor's clinical tone couldn't quite mask her anger. The latest was 3 weeks ago, a Blackfoot girl, no more than 14. She died of internal injuries before she could tell me who had held her. And Captain Thornton ruled it a case of tribal violence, Dr. Ward replied, her mouth twisting with disgust. He didn't even bother to ask for details. Emma swallowed hard, steeling herself against the horror of it. Doctor, I'm trying to find information about a specific woman who disappeared into this network about 5 years ago. An Apache woman named Morning Flower. Dr. Ward's eyebrows rose. That's an oddly specific inquiry. I made a promise, Emma said simply. The doctor studied her for a long moment, then nodded. 5 years ago would be before my time at Fort Sullivan, but there's someone who might know. She lowered her voice further. Miles Fletcher. He operates the trading post 3 miles east of here. He hears things, rumors, gossip from travelers. He's also been known to help women escape from situations like yours. Can he be trusted? As much as anyone in this territory. Dr. Ward's expression softened slightly. He lost a daughter to the trade. She was taken while traveling to visit relatives in Helena. Another parent robbed of a child. Another life shattered by men like Hawkins and Jenkins. Emma touched the turquoise pendant beneath her blouse, feeling its weight like a promise. There's more, she said, deciding to trust this formidable woman. I wasn't alone when I escaped. There was another girl, younger than me, Mexican. She's with, Emma hesitated, then continued, with Apache friends, safe, for now. But Hawkins was pursuing us. He may still be searching. Dr. Ward's eyebrows rose even higher. Apache friends, that's unexpected. They saved us both, Emma said firmly. The doctor nodded slowly. Then we need to move quickly. If Hawkins is still in the area, it won't take him long to reach the fort. And when he does, Captain Thornton will hand me over, Emma finished grimly. Perhaps not directly, but he won't protect you either. Dr. Ward closed her notebook, her decision made. I have supplies to collect from Fletcher's trading post this afternoon. You should accompany me. Won't Captain Thornton object? He rarely concerns himself with the infirmary's operations. And Lieutenant Pierce can ensure we leave without unnecessary scrutiny. Emma felt a surge of gratitude for these unexpected allies. Thank you, Doctor. Don't thank me yet, Miss Caldwell. We're all taking considerable risks. She fixed Emma with a penetrating gaze. What exactly do you hope to accomplish? Justice for your parents? Rescue for other captives? These are powerful men you're challenging. It was a fair question. Emma took a moment to consider her answer, wanting to be honest about both her intentions and her limitations. All of those things, she admitted finally. But I'm not foolish enough to think I can bring down Hawkins's entire operation alone. For now, I want to gather evidence, find witnesses willing to testify, locate Morning Flower if possible, and ensure Luisa, the Mexican girl, remains safe. Doctor. Ward nodded, seemingly satisfied with the practicality of these goals. Fletcher may have connections who can help. There's a network of sorts, people who oppose the trade but work quietly, out of necessity. A network, Emma repeated, hope flickering within her, like an underground resistance of a kind, disparate individuals rather than an organized movement, but effective in their own way. The doctor rose, signaling the end of their conversation. Meet me behind the infirmary at 3 o'clock. Bring only what you can carry easily. As Emma left the infirmary, the rain had stopped, leaving the parade ground steaming in the midday sun. She walked slowly toward her quarters, mind racing. The existence of a network, however informal, changed everything. Perhaps she wasn't as alone in this fight as she'd feared. Back in her small room, Emma gathered her meager possessions, the clothes she'd been given, a small knife she'd taken from the mess hall, and most importantly, Running Wolf's pendant. As she tucked it safely into her pocket, a knock sounded at her door. "Miss Caldwell?" Lieutenant Pierce's voice was urgent. "And may I speak with you?" She opened the door to find the young officer looking uncharacteristically agitated. "What is it?" "Riders approaching from the south," he said in a low voice. "6 men, led by a man in black. Captain Thornton has ordered preparations to receive them." "Hawkins." Emma's blood ran cold. "How long?" "Less than an hour. They've passed Elk Creek already." "An hour. Not enough time to reach Fletcher's trading post with Dr. Ward." Emma made a swift decision. "Lieutenant, I need to leave the fort immediately. Can you help me?" Pierce hesitated, military discipline warring with his conscience. "The captain has ordered that you remain in your quarters until our visitors arrive." "You know what will happen if I stay," Emma said quietly. "Please." For a moment, she thought he would refuse. Then his jaw set determinedly. "Read, the supply wagon leaves through the western gate in 10 minutes. Be behind the stables. I'll create a distraction." "Thank you," Emma whispered, touching his arm briefly. As soon as he left, she moved quickly, tucking her few belongings into a small bundle. Through her window, she could see increased activity at the main gate, preparations for Hawkins's arrival. Time was running out. Slipping from her quarters, Emma kept to the shadows, working her way toward the stables at the western edge of the fort. Her heart pounded in her ears, every shout from the sentries making her flinch. Almost there, just a few more yards. "Going somewhere, Miss Caldwell?" Emma froze at the sound of Captain Thornton's voice directly behind her. Emma turned slowly to face Captain Thornton, her pulse racing, but her expression carefully composed. He stood with hands clasped behind his back, his face a mask of professional disappointment. "Captain," she acknowledged, straightening her shoulders. "I was just getting some air." "With all your belongings?" He nodded toward the small bundle clutched in her hand. "I thought I made myself clear about remaining in your quarters until our visitors arrive." "You did." Emma saw no point in pretending. "And I have no intention of being handed over to Victor Hawkins." Something flickered in Thornton's eyes, not anger, but something more complex. "You misunderstand the situation, Miss Caldwell." "Do I? Your brother-in-law works for Hawkins. The fort receives unregistered supplies from Empire Mine, and you've systematically ignored evidence of trafficking operations that have claimed dozens of women's lives." Emma lifted her chin. "I understand perfectly." Thornton glanced around, ensuring they weren't overheard. "The territories operate by different rules than the East, Miss Caldwell. Compromises must be made to maintain order." "Is that what you tell yourself? That selling young women is a necessary compromise?" "I don't sell anyone," he replied sharply. "I simply look elsewhere." "The alternative would be open conflict with the mining interests, resulting in more deaths, not fewer." "So you're a coward rather than a criminal," Emma said, the words cutting like a blade. "That's little comfort to the girls in Jenkins's cells." Thornton's jaw tightened. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, unexpectedly, he stepped aside, clearing her path to the stables. "Lieutenant Pierce is creating quite a commotion at the East Gate," he said, his voice neutral. "I should investigate immediately. It will take me at least 10 minutes to restore order." Emma stared at him, unable to conceal her surprise. "Why?" "Perhaps I'm tired of compromising." He wouldn't meet her eyes. "Or perhaps I simply recognize that Hawkins would eventually kill you, and I've seen enough death." He gestured toward the stables. "Go." The supply wagon leaves momentarily. She hesitated only briefly before hurrying past him. Behind her, Thornton's voice followed, barely audible. There was an Apache woman, 5 years ago. She ended up in Helena, at a place called the Golden Lily. I don't know if she's still there. Emma paused, turning back. Thank you. Thornton nodded once, then strode away toward the commotion at the east gate, shouting orders as he went. The supply wagon was already rolling when Emma reached it. The driver, a grizzled old soldier named Jenkins, barely slowing as she scrambled aboard and concealed herself beneath a tarpaulin. Minutes later, they passed through the western gate and onto the open trail. They had traveled perhaps a mile when Jenkins suddenly pulled the wagon to a halt. "This is where you get off, miss," he called. "I got someone waiting for you." Heart pounding, Emma cautiously emerged from her hiding place. Standing beside the trail was Dr. Ward, already mounted on a sturdy mare. Beside her, a second horse waited, saddled and ready. "How did you—" "Lieutenant Pierce isn't the only one with a conscience," Dr. Ward replied briskly. "Now hurry. Hawkins will realize you're gone soon enough." Emma mounted the offered horse with newfound confidence, secured her bundle, and followed the doctor as they set off at a brisk trot away from the main trail. "Fletcher is expecting us," Dr. Ward explained as they rode. "From there, we can access the network, people who can help gather evidence against Hawkins and Jenkins." "And find Morning Flower?" Dr. Ward's expression grew somber. "If she's still at the Golden Lily in Helena, it won't be easy. That establishment caters to territorial officials and visiting dignitaries. Security is tight, but not impossible. Nothing is impossible with the right allies." The doctor gave her an appraising look. "You've changed since you arrived at the fort. There's a determination in you now." Emma touched the turquoise pendant at her throat, thinking of Running Wolf's steady presence, his quiet strength. "I've learned that surviving isn't enough, not when others are still suffering." They crested a small rise, and Dr. Ward suddenly reined in her horse, staring at something ahead. Emma followed her gaze and felt her breath catch. In the small clearing below stood 5 mounted Apache warriors. Even at this distance, she recognized Running Wolf's broad shoulders and straight posture as he sat astride his horse at the center of the group. "You're Apache friends, I presume?" Dr. Ward asked dryly. Emma nodded, unable to suppress the smile spreading across her face. "Yes." They rode down to the clearing, where Running Wolf watched their approach with those dark, perceptive eyes that seemed to see straight through pretense. When Emma halted before him, he inclined his head in greeting. "Emma Caldwell, you escaped the fort." "With help," she acknowledged, nodding toward Dr. Ward. "This is Dr. Abigail Ward. She opposes the traffickers." Running Wolf studied the doctor briefly, then returned his attention to Emma. "Hawkins and his men reached the fort. When we saw them enter, we feared for your safety. I received warning in time." Emma hesitated, then added, "I've learned something about your sister. She was taken to Helena, to a place called the Golden Lily." A complex series of emotions crossed Running Wolf's face: hope, pain, determination. "Then we go to Helena." "It won't be simple," Dr. Ward cautioned. "The Golden Lily is heavily guarded, and Hawkins has allies throughout the territory." "We have allies too," Emma reminded her. "The network you mentioned." "And my people," Running Wolf added. "We have traded with the Blackfoot near Helena. They would help for the right cause." Grey Fox, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. "The girl, Louisa, is safe with our women. She learns quickly. Already she helps with the children." Emma felt a weight lift from her shoulders at this news. At least one life had been saved from the darkness that had nearly claimed her own. "What is your plan now, Emma Caldwell?" Running Wolf asked, his voice carrying a note she hadn't heard before, something like respect, but warmer. She thought carefully before answering. Her world had expanded beyond recognition in the span of a week. The path she'd expected to travel, marriage, children, a settler's life, had vanished along with her parents and their homestead. In its place stood a new purpose, shaped by fire and grief, but no less true. "I'm going to help build a case against Hawkins and Jenkins," she said firmly. "Gather witnesses, evidence. Dr. Ward has been documenting victims for months. Together with Fletcher and others in the network, we might finally bring them to justice." "And Morning Flower?" Emma met his gaze directly. "We'll find her. Whatever state she's in, whatever has happened to her, she deserves to come home." Running Wolf nodded slowly, something softening in his expression. "Then I will ride with you." "It could take months," Emma warned, "and it will be dangerous." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. All worthwhile journeys are. As they set off together toward Fletcher's trading post, the first stop on a much longer journey, Emma felt the turquoise pendant warm against her skin. She was no longer just Emma Caldwell, Settler's daughter. She had become something new, a woman with purpose, with allies spanning two worlds, with the courage to face darkness rather than flee from it. And riding beside her was a man who had seen that transformation, who had in some ways guided it, and who now looked at her not as someone to be saved, but as a partner in a shared mission. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with danger and uncertainty. But for the first time since waking to the sound of splintering wood and her parents' screams, Emma felt something like hope unfurling within her. Not just for justice, but for a future she could now only dimly imagine. One where the barriers between worlds might someday fall. The Montana sun broke through the clouds as they rode west, casting long shadows behind them and illuminating the path ahead with golden light.